Hi, it's Mark Owen from Moose Marketing and PR, the editor of Punchline, and welcome to Punchline Talks, the business breakfast briefers, where each week I invite a panel of experts to join us to talk about the local newspapers, the national newspapers, and what's going on in their own individual businesses, their own individual business sectors, and finally, what's caught their eye in this week's Punchline. If you like the show, please like, share, and subscribe. And before we get going, I'd just like to thank our sponsors. Hazelwood's, thanks ever so much for that, guys. And they got me a brand new coffee mug to go with it as well. Cheap at half the price. Anyway, let's introduce the panel. So I'd like to introduce Nigel Tillott. He's a director and head of Gloucester office at Davies and Partners. Davies and Partners have over 180 staff across 4 offices, Gloucester, Bristol, Birmingham and London, have a turnover around 10 million quid. We've got Chris Richards, MD of Utility Saving Expert. He's got a team of 4, started the business in 2017. The expertise obviously is energy. Thanks ever so much, Chris, welcome. We've got Joe Roberts, Director of Roberts Limbrick Architects, over 100 staff with offices in Gloucester, Newport, and a turnover of around £9 million. And finally, last not least, we've got Glenn Collingbourne, Director, specialising in tax at Hazelwood's. And of course, Hazelwood's with over 400 staff split across 2 offices. Turnover, Glenn?
I looked it up, 32 million.
32 million. Not bad going at all. Thanks ever so much for that. Okay, guys. Well, where should we start? Let's just quickly run through the national newspapers. I'll share the screen courtesy of the BBC. Well, it's terrible, isn't it? If you've been watching the news, as we all have, but going through the headlines. So blood on their hands. The Times, blood on his hands. This is Roman Abramovich from Chelsea, the Chelsea owner. Again, the Metro, blood on his hands. Fall of the Roman Empire. The Sun, Skinsky. The Daily Mirror, blood brothers. Again, this connection between Putin and Abramovich. The Daily Telegraph, British public to be asked to take in refugees. The Financial Times, half of Ukraine monopoly economy shut down. The Guardian, medieval conditions in city under constant attack. The Daily Mail, Europe's biggest refugee crisis since the war as 4 million people flee. The Daily Express, Putin takes revenge on the West. And finally, the Daily Star, a cost of living crisis, even for the oligarchs, will surge. I've checked the bank balance, but we can either fill the car with petrol or buy Chelsea. Well, where should we start? Let's start with you today, Glenn. Thanks ever so much for joining. I also hear you quite regularly on BBC Radio Gloucestershire as well. We'll give them a plug. So, Glenn, what have you picked out from us, please?
So I picked out 3 articles. Obviously, I had to start with the current crisis, and I've just gone off piece with a couple of other things, which I'll try to rattle through quite quickly here. So, and this is the article by doing some commentary there in the Guardian from Patrick Winter. So what he's talking about is the recent meeting between Sergei Lavrov and Dmitry Kuleba, who are from Ukraine and Russia, to talk about how we're going to prevent this. Of course, it didn't go that way at all. What basically happened is that the Russian representative pretty much denied everything. The Ukrainian minister, he's actually started to talk about how maybe we won't go into NATO then, provided you can give us some sort of assurances that actually we'll just sit in the middle, we won't go into NATO and we won't be part of Russia. He's tried to open that dialogue, not particularly forthcoming. It seemed like Lavrov was basically there to push more propaganda. One of the most concerning things was that when asked about whether that's a possibility, about maybe Russia would attack other countries, he replied, Russia has no plans to attack other countries. We have not even attacked Ukraine. So obviously not particularly encouraging when you're trying to negotiate a peace settlement. This is moving on to business, and this has some local ramifications. So we may have come across them ourselves here. There's an organisation called Funding Circle. They certainly operate locally. They're one of the big 3 peer-to-peer lenders. The idea of peer-to-peer is that you could have a wealthy individual says, I want to invest in businesses, often local businesses. They put forward a sum of money into the platform. Let's say it's £20,000. And then in this case, Funding Circle would go to its potential customers and say, are you looking to borrow? Here's £10,000. And then the interest goes to the individual private lender funding circle have now pulled out of that sector. They were one of the big three. That's all of the big three out of peer-to-peer lending now. So that seems to be a way of financing which has died a death. It was very popular a few years ago, very popular before the pandemic. Clearly, everybody struggled in the pandemic, but everybody's pulling out. And then finally, sort of a fun story, but sort of shows the sort of still that there is, you know, a level of prejudice in the USA, is the director of the movie Black Panther. He went into a bank, and he, knowing he was quite well known, he just slipped a piece of paper under the till and said, I want to withdraw $12,000, but I don't want to make a big deal of it. Could you go and count it privately? So they called the police and he was arrested because they thought he was trying to rob the bank.
I'll tell you one thing, Glenn. I'll tell you, I'm very impressed with your pronunciations of names, actually. That's pretty good. That's pretty good going. I'm just going to quickly put a story up, just to keep it lighthearted today, obviously, because the world has gone mad. But there's a story in the Sun today, which is about a chap there, just fill it, where he's taken a wheelie bin to a petrol station, and he's filling the wheelie bin with 143 pounds worth of petrol that he's stealing. And not only did he do it once, but he went back and did it again later on the same evening. The police are investigating. Anyway, Nigel, let's go to you, please. Thanks, Glenn.
Okay, well, as you know, I'm stuck in my house at the moment because of COVID, so you can't actually see on the screen my newspaper stories on my phone, but they are there, honestly. I thought I'd start with Chelsea, because I'm a football fan, and there's always a bit of an issue about football and the finances. And of course, the Ukrainian crisis is now very much affecting everyday lives. And Chelsea, very interesting position as far as I'm concerned. I'm glad I'm not a Chelsea fan right now, but they've done very well out of Abramovich's billions over the last few years. So maybe what comes around goes around, who knows? But it's really interesting construct. If you start looking at the detail about it, in terms of playing games, they're not allowed to spend more than £20,000 on travel to games. Now, if it was Gloucester City paying £20,000 to go travel to a game, you think, well, give me £20,000, we're going to have a luxury. But Chelsea, who might be playing all over Europe, and with their squad and the people they take with them, that's actually quite a big challenge, I think, for them. Can't sell tickets, or can't sell any new tickets, can't sell any merchandise. So it's actually going to be very interesting to see how that pans out. I do, and the one thing I feel is a bit odd and difficult, I haven't sorted out yet, is what to do with away fans, because Chelsea soon will be a home fan only ground because of this, and that seems to be advantaging Chelsea rather than disadvantaging. But anyway, I'll leave that there. I think there's quite a lot to scratch heads if you're into football about that. The other story I picked up was the from which was the headline was a bumpy period for UK living costs, says Boris. Well, Boris has always wanted to say the obvious, isn't he? I think, but the article did go in to talk about it in a bit more detail. Clearly, it can't be just down to Ukraine, because we were going to go through massive problems anyway with costs. We already were there, but of course, this is now added on a whole new layer. But the article goes on to say all about, well, about dependence on Russia. Probably should talk about China as well, frankly. And what we do with energy, we've got to reduce reliance. And I think there's a debate to be had now about, it's all right having our ideals about let's go green fully, but do we actually have in the short term to do something about supplies locally of supplies which aren't necessarily as green, because we can't afford to be reliant on the Russians and indeed the Chinese. So I think there's an interesting debate to be had on that. Chris probably leads into Chris now. I think he's next.
I was going to say that's a
I'm going to hand over.
Thanks.
Nice segue there. Yeah, Chris. The story I picked up, I couldn't actually get any papers this morning. Both my local newsagents had no papers when I turned up, so there's been a problem locally for the whole week. But fall back to the BBC website, and there's an article on there by Roger Harabin is exploring the Russian energy crisis, saying, can it help curb global heating? And the kind of the position that Boris is in is between a rock and a hard place, really, to kind of reduce the reliance, although it's only a small reliance, on Russian gas, but also, as you were saying, Nigel, basically help local supplies, really. There's a lot of noise around him looking back at fracking, but obviously we all know there's not a lot of public support for that. Nobody really wants people, drilling deep holes in their neighbourhood, and what can be done is the problem. So I think they'll fall back onto less green sources of energy for now, and ultimately they're going to have to look at. Well, the problem they've got is any real green technologies take a long time to put in place. As long as 20 years. So I know there's various other things they're looking at trying to encourage people. The International Energy Agency, I think it was, trying to urge people to turn their thermostats down. There's talk of new insulation plans to help insulate people's houses, trains running slower to use less electricity. There's all sorts of stuff that they're trying to do, but I do think he's between a rock and a hard place. To be honest.
I don't know how old you are, Chris, but maybe some of the other guys can remember. In the 70s, we used to have blackouts. There were all sorts of power cuts and things when I was a kid. You remember that, Nigel?
I remember that. Yes, I do. Yeah,
I remember it as well. Getting the candles out.
Yeah,
I'm not that old, guys. I'm 36. So.
You notice I didn't ask Joe then.
I'm old enough to remember, unfortunately.
Just very quickly, Chris. I mean, there's lots and lots of talk about revisiting the sort of tidal lagoon, tidal power. What's your thoughts on that?
To be honest with you, I can't see why we haven't. I mean, we've got coastline all around us. It makes absolute sense to do so, but personally, it's beyond me to why they haven't. Okay,
right. Thanks very much. Well, thanks ever so much for that. Great to have you on the show as well. Right, Joe, nice to see you again.
Hi, Mark. Yeah, good to see you too. So in terms of the story I was going to look at and talk about, obviously everybody's touched on the ongoing backdrop of really serious, very sad news. But there's been another crisis rumbling in the background this week, which were the reports of the death of the great British pork pie, a great British institution. And there was a stunning survey, actually, of 18 to 13-year-olds, which showed a staggering 18% have never eaten a pork pie, which I thought was a real shocker. So that was the beginning of the week. But thankfully, we're getting towards the end of the week now, and the truth is out that the great British public love pastry-filled delights. And they're actually spending over £1 billion a year on pastry-filled objects, which is awesome. Also this week, it was the Great British Pie Week and the Pie Awards, the most delicious awards of the year. And that attracted 976 entries, which was a record. So the pie lives on. And I just thought it was interesting. There's some really fascinating pie entries, which included a kangaroo ale and Tasmanian pepperberry pie, which I thought sounded rather interesting, and also a Christmas dinner pie, which I'd quite like to try. And then the article just goes on to talk about the rise of the gourmet pie as well, and the renaissance of the pie as a fine dining dish. So long live the pie.
I think you're a bit of a pie man then.
Yeah, on occasion. It's got its place, hasn't it?
I'm really surprised because if I want a lump of pig fat wrapped in pastry, the pork pie is where I'm always going to go,
Where else do you go, I suppose?
I don't think you can beat a pork pie. I love a pork pie. Anyway, no, thanks for that, Joe. Thanks so much. Okay, Glenn, let's get back over to you, please. And I think when we talked about this before and your work at Hazelwood's, what's going on at the moment in the sort of HMRC area?
Yeah, so I'll say what's really current at the moment, and I work in personal tax, so I don't advise your really big corporates, but I do family-sized businesses and that kind of thing, as well as individuals and whatever, inheritance tax planning, that kind of thing. But what I've also got a specialism in is people who are mobile employees, so people who are living in the UK but want to move overseas, or they move, they're from overseas and they want to move to the UK, and they need to understand the taxes around that kind of thing. Very, very big topic. You've heard of non-DOMs. That's been a sort of a controversial thing over the years. So I might often advise those kinds of people. But one thing that's really current, and it's particularly since the pandemic, and this is illustrated by a survey that we commissioned recently, just looking down at it here. So we across 1.4 million job adverts, 11% of those jobs advertised were entirely for working from home. So there was no office or whatever part of that employment. So that makes sense. We're all familiar with that. We've obviously all worked at home a lot recently. But what if your employee is actually in a different country? So that's where we've actually had a lot of inquiries. And so what people will often think is, we're recruiting a guy in Germany. That's good. He'll work for our company based in Gloucester, say, and we'll pay him. You know, why wouldn't you? That's not how it works at all. What people don't often realize is that actually all the payroll needs to be run in that local country. So what they might not realize is that they actually need to be paying German taxes in this example, running a German payroll and reporting and paying that tax over accordingly to the German tax authorities. So that's an area where we or me would come in and assist. Of course, you've got other things, you've got exchange rate fluctuations and all those things to consider. So that's probably what's quite common and quite big at the moment, I would say, and that's all sizes of business, because of course, with this home working thing, we've suddenly realized we can recruit people anywhere in the world. Doesn't mean we've got to pay them 10 times what we paid anybody else. So as long as you can get the expertise, and as we know, there's massive number of vacancies in the UK at the moment. If we can't find the employees here, we've got to look elsewhere.
No, it doesn't matter where you work, as long as you're talented and
Exactly.
You can speak the language, and there you go. No, fascinating. Thanks ever so much for that, Claire. Nigel, great to see you again. Now, I always thought you were a commercial property director.
No, I did property when I was a trainee, and I'd never gone there again, to be quite honest.
Whenever you and I get together, we always seem to chat about commercial property anyway.
We do a lot of it as a firm, but it's nowhere. I've never been that way at all.
Okay, what's happening at Davies and Partners since I last saw you?
Well, it's interesting what Glenn was talking about. I can do another segue if you like. I've actually got a tribunal case on at the moment, because my area is employment law, where a client, I'm clearly not going to name the client, but their employee decided to disappear and work out of Turkey without telling them, which is a bit of an issue. But anyway, she doesn't seem to think so. So anyway, we've actually got a matter proceeding tribunal on that very subject. So what's happening in the law? In a way, we very much depend on others and what other businesses are doing. So it's been a very sort of strange period. The first part of last year was actually really busy, and then I think people were really struggling with supply chains and getting what they want. This year started okay, but I think there's a lot of wariness about what comes next. I think there's a real concern about inflation. There's a real concern about wages and what's going to happen with wages and what that's going to do to businesses. But there's also a massive problem with supply still. So there's all sorts of challenges, and I'm not sure I know quite how they're going to hit for the moment. I think we just sort of keep the heads down and carry on and see what's next. But I think it's a bumpy period. I think probably in hindsight, the furlough scheme was perhaps a bit on the generous side, because what it meant was that people spent a lot more money they wouldn't have had. So therefore we have this massive explosion of demand, which couldn't then be met because everything had contracted. And now it's sort of going the other way. So I think we're going to be in this bit of a bumpy period, and now we've got Ukraine to throw into it as well. So who knows? I think all we can do is keep going, all doing our best, because if we will stop, then that's going to make things worse. So I think for now it's carry on. And as a business, I would say it's probably where we thought we would be at this stage of the year.
There's also going to be a lot more industrial action, though. Surely, if inflation rises, people want more pay. They can't get it from the pay. We've seen Asda go on strike, Stagecoach, Doughties at the moment are on strike as well. So maybe you're going to be a very busy chap coming down the tracks.
Well, it's interesting. Employment law is a bit of a bellwether in a way. I mean, usually when we're quiet, it means the economy is doing well. When we're busy, it means that things are a challenge. Now, at the start of the lockdown, we were really, really busy, and then it quieted down. It's been fairly steady as employment, but I do think that it may be that employment law is going to get busier as this year goes on, because I think there's a lot of tension coming.
Okay, thanks so much, Chris. Great to see you as well, mate. Can you tell us a little bit about Utility Saving Expert, please?
Yeah, of course. So originally formed the business in 2014, and at the time it was to support a not-for-profit I was running. We were seeing loads of people with really high energy bills, and we thought a way of both supporting them and generating income for the not-for-profit at the time was to help them switch. Fast forward to 2016, it's relaunched the full comparison site, so not just energy, insurance as well, catering to consumers and businesses. We now, we're energy focused, but we've basically got a social focus. So we donate 10% of our net profits to charities that support or help fight fuel poverty. So at the moment, we are, as you can imagine, extremely busy, but not with what you'd normally imagine. Normally, you imagine it would be switching people or switching businesses. Or I mean, lots of businesses are still able to switch and get a better deal. But at the moment, the main thing we're getting is a lot of people sort of saying, look, I can't get a better deal. What can I do? Particularly businesses saying, look, you know, what can we do to try and save money if we can't get a better rate? And there are many things they can do. You know, they can change their lighting. They can look at using more energy efficient equipment in the office. There's all sorts of things that we're advising them on what they can do. But yeah, it's a challenging environment. Yeah, that's what we do in a nutshell, really.
And what's the biggest thing that companies can do to save energy if they can't switch?
I think the biggest thing we're noticing is lighting, especially for bigger offices. So changing from sort of your standard lighting to LED or fluorescence. You know, use LEDs use like, I think it's 75% less electricity than your standard bulbs. So yeah, lighting is one of the things we're seeing, but also shopping around. You know, you might find that, you know, people are even finding that even with their current suppliers, they're going back and in some cases, you know, getting a better deal, but it's few and far between. You know, at the moment, the rates just keep going one way and that's up.
Okay, thanks ever so much for that, Chris. Going to flip over to Joe now. Hi, Joe. Okay, mate, you guys have been busy. You've been busy. I'm going to share the screen again with you because part of what I've got here is your new website. There we go, a new branding.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I didn't key this up for you or anything.
No, that's very good. It looks okay, I think. I mean, we've had our old branding for over 10 years since we merged, I think 12 years ago. So it was time for an update and time for a refresh. The practice has changed a considerable amount over that time. And so we found that we wanted something that really reflected better who we are, what we're about, and hopefully where we're going as well. And in particular, talked about our people, who are, you know, the most important part of our practice, really.
Now, you do so many different projects around the county. Can you tell us one or two that you're really proud of here in Gloucestershire?
Well, that's a good question. In terms of in Gloucestershire, I think particularly proud of the work we did at Honeybourne Place, which just come up on the left there, which is a new commercial office next to Waitrose, and won a regional British Council for Offices award. We're very proud of that. Also, obviously, our own offices, and also the work we completed recently at the King's School for Dolverton in a very complex building, which is Grade 2 star listed and sat within the Cathedral precinct. Now,
there's the marketplace at the moment. Is it, you know, construction industry? Surely you can't tell on costs what's happening. It must be an absolute nightmare for the guys. Now, hopefully, you're cushioned from that, isn't it? It must be a different level. Is the work still coming in? Or is it?
Yeah, no, we're not exactly cushioned because more often than not, you know, our fees are linked to construction costs. So, you know, we're not cushioned from it. I think we are incredibly busy, and actually still incredibly busy across all sectors, which is quite rare for us. Normally, there's sort of peaks and troughs, which enables us to move people around to sort of plug gaps. But we're busy across the piece. I think what we're seeing is a couple of things that are quite worrying. Obviously, escalating construction costs for various reasons, which are impacting on projects. You know, a number of our projects are carried over from sort of 12, 18 months ago where they were put on hold. So the, you know, prices then compared to now are causing some shocks and some ripples for clients, I guess. And then the other thing is the shortage of people in the construction industry in particular, but it's, you know, it's a much wider problem at the moment in terms of finding people.
And looking forward to 2022, is there anything coming down the tracks in design that is a little bit different?
Yeah, I mean, we've got some really exciting projects that are moving towards site that have gone through planning, one of which is BREEAM Outstanding. So that will be the first BREEAM Outstanding workplace in the county. BREEAM, if you don't know, is a metric really for sustainability, and BREEAM Outstanding is the highest, and it's the top sort of couple of percent of all buildings in the country. So it's a really high bar to meet. So that's really exciting, and a number of other projects coming through, and long in the sort of gestation period, like the designer retail outlet and others that are moving forward, and looking forward to seeing those happen, hopefully.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks ever so much for that, Joe. Really like the branding, by the way. I know how difficult it is. We went through the process ourselves. It's not easy when it's your own thing that you're actually trying to design and move forward. Okay, Glenn, let's come back over to you. Punchline, what have you picked out from this week, please?
Obviously, I had those hacks at Punchline. They came up with the heading: accountants fined 1.25 million for botched bar audit. And there's a that's off your site there. So what's happened there is KPMG, that's one of the big four accountancy firms, as we call it. You know, their turnover's billions. They did the audit for Revolution, which got the vodka bar, which I'm sure we all know and love. And basically they didn't do as good a job as it as they should have done, which it just recently floated. They didn't look at the costs properly, and somehow somebody must have ratted them out somehow that the figures weren't what they ought to be, and so they got fined. That's just a quick background behind that. If you're a registered auditor, which is what KPMG are, that's a very protected name. Anybody can call themselves an accountant. You don't have to have any qualifications, but to be an auditor, you do have to have a very high level of professionalism, and they should have spotted some things that they didn't, is what's happened. And why that's important is because if it was floated, so if you guys wanted to say invest in a company, you would look at the figures and assume that they're okay, and so you'd be prepared to put money into that company. And the fact was the figures weren't okay, and so people could have been misled and made poor investments.
Okay, thanks so much for explaining that as well. Nigel, what have you picked out from this week's Punch, please?
I was interested in the Domino's pizza story, the record profits on the back of the Euros. And I just thought, how ironic. Italy won the Euros. We should be buying more fish and chips, not more pizza. We're supporting the enemy. Or not the enemy. I don't know. That's the wrong word. Don't use that word.
It's not a woke programme, don't worry.
We're supporting the opposition.
We know where you voted in Brexit.
Supporting their profits instead. But that's all I picked out, which I thought was great.
Good slice of a story. Okay, Chris, what have you picked out for this week's Punch?
I picked out the startup businesses in Gloucester given £350,000 as the Start and Grow Enterprise celebrates its fifth anniversary. I just thought, with everything going on, at this time, more than ever, businesses need support, and things like these funds and these growth funds. I just think it's fantastic that Gloucestershire businesses are continuing to get supported, really. So that jumped out at me.
Okay, thanks so much. And Joe, Punchline, what have you picked out, please? The last one.
Yeah, well, for me, it was the launch of the Viserian Luna, the 3D printed garden pod, which I thought was really exciting. Not just because the designer is a former colleague and friend of mine, but also because I think it's a real game changer in terms of the technology and its potential future uses. I think the opportunity to 3D print buildings and small buildings could be applied to refugees, as we know, and war-torn countries, and how you can quickly rebuild and provide homes and facilities that it might meet the homeless crisis here. And also, at the other end of the scale, maybe the cost of living crisis for young professionals and young people at the minute. So I think it's really exciting. I think also, obviously, it offers freedom for designers. So you can see with that Luna pod, the sort of double curves, things that are very, very difficult to produce in traditional construction, but in terms of 3D printing are possible, and you can do all sorts of things. The speed of delivery. So I thought it was really exciting. There's some technical challenges which I think they're going to need to overcome, but I'll be watching that with interest and excitement. Actually, I think it's really exciting.
That's actually the story that I picked out this week as well. I think you're dead right. I went down there and obviously shot that little video with Neil Ricketts. Very, very exciting time for them. And I met your mate Ben, by the way, and had a nice chat about that. The other story that really caught my eye this week, and I'll just wrap it up, was the No Child Left Behind, which Punchline sponsored and was associated with. But I'd just quickly like to thank the sponsors for that, because it's very important. If you don't get sponsorship for these charitable events, you never get them off the ground. So we had Forest Green Rovers, Evans Jones, Oxbox, Carpet Outlet, Gloucestershire College University, Rennie Shaw, Creed Catering, the Mayflower Restaurant, Hartbury College and University, and to Interstar. Anyway, thanks ever so much to those guys. Thank you ever so much for joining Punchline Talks. If you like the show, please like, share, and subscribe. And a big thanks also to our sponsors, Hazelwoods. Hopefully, we'll catch you again next week. Thanks to my fantastic panel. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.